Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com.
Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities. You can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter, and I encourage you to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU or GrantAdvisor. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open, and you can post comments and questions. In order to use the chat room, you must open a listener-only account. You'll find a link to open the account on the episode page, and you can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com or send messages through Facebook and Twitter. You'll find a Nonprofit U fan page on Facebook, and the Twitter account is @NonprofitU. We'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark. The call-in number is 34721. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. Today we're going to have a GrantAdvisor Teach In, and we'll discuss the roles and implications of transparency and reciprocity in providing feedback to grant-making foundations. And when I talk about transparency, I'm talking about information that has been disclosed in terms of what is done and how it's done, so people can get a really, really good sense for, an organization. So normally we are looking at grantees and their way of doing things, but this time we're going to focus on the grant makers and the way they do things. So we will provide an overview of what GrantAdvisor is, and GrantAdvisor is a new platform, where to find it, how to use the tool, in hopes that you can try this at home. And it should be noted that GrantAdvisor has recently rolled out, and the primary test markets are Minnesota and California, although their database has organizations or foundations from all over the country. As a result, most of the data that are from those two states. We encourage nonprofit leaders in other states or from other states to take an active role in reaching out to your local colleagues to begin to share your experiences on GrantAdvisor as well. Again, we encourage you to call in with questions and to participate in live chats at about the 30-minute mark. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Nonprofit professionals are especially encouraged to call in and share your stories and ask questions. Today's guests are Kari Aanestad and Andrea Sanow. Kari Aanestad is the Development Manager at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. In this role, Kari secures and stewards grant and individual donor support for MCN. She also supports the development of other fundraising professionals throughout Minnesota through various channels, including in-person and online trainings, the Minnesota Grants Alert, and the Minnesota Grants Directory. Kari holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and Political Science from the Augsburg University. She's class of 08, and a Master of Divinity from Luther Seminary, class of 12. Most recently, she served as a grant writer and outcomes manager for St. David's Center. Kari brings a holistic wealth of experience to her role, including international travel to over 20 countries, hospital chaplaincy in England, in teaching and tutoring positions ranging from elementary to postgraduate levels in writing and compassionate communication. Andrea Sanow is the GrantAdvisor Coordinator at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, where she develops, implements, and evaluates brand and communication strategies to increase the visibility and credibility of the GrantAdvisor website service. She also produces marketing materials, develops presentations for conferences, and manages electronic and print communications efforts related to GrantAdvisor. Andrea holds a Bachelor of Arts in English, class of 210, and Master of Fine Arts in Nonfiction Writing, class of 17 from Augsburg University. She most recently served the nonprofit sector as program assistant at Arts Midwest. Her previous nonprofit work includes serving organizations working with housing and higher education, respectively. From 2012 to 2013, she served as a member of the Lutheran Volunteer Corps in San Francisco, California. So you see we have two very highly qualified young ladies. Said, no further ado, I want to thank you both for being on Nonprofit U today. Ladies, it's been an honor to have you, and we'll start with Kari. Can you tell us about the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits and how you came to work with them?
Sure, and thank you for having us, Valerie. It's an honor to be on your show. So the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, or MCN is our acronym, is the largest state association of nonprofits in the United States. So we have about 2,200 active nonprofit members across Minnesota, and we're one of 35 or so some state associations of nonprofits like us. So we're one of 35, and we're established 30 years ago. So we're just celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, and we were established kind of with the overarching goal to meet an increasing need within our state to really elevate the voice of the nonprofit sector in the work that we do. So I started with MCN just about a year ago, and I've been a fundraiser for 8 years. And like you said, I come from the nonprofit St. David Center previously, and I'm so happy to be now serving kind of the broader sector in my current role.
Oh, wow, thanks. And before we have Andrea to introduce herself, I'm just curious about the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. Are you guys the first association of your kind in the country, or, are you among the first?
That's a great question. I don't know about in terms of the first, but we are certainly one of the largest, if not the largest, in terms of kind of number of members. And with a 30-year history, that certainly puts us in the running, I think, for one of the earlier formed state associations of nonprofits.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Kari. So, Andrea, what brings you to the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits?
I just want to say thanks for having us on as well, Valerie. And I started at MCN about 2.5 months ago, so I'm pretty new. And I was just drawn to my current position, working on GrantAdvisor and the grants directory with Kari. It felt like an opportunity to work on an exciting project in the sector. It's my short answer. So.
Okay. And with me, I never met a word that I didn't like. I can draw a longer answer, but but I think we'll focus on GrantAdvisor
things to talk about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Andrea, we seem to be living in an age of increased transparency in which nonprofits are being encouraged to share as much information about what they do, and not only what they do, how they do it. They're also being asked to disclose more and more about their financial performance and how they make decisions and their impact. So what are some of the issues and trends that you're seeing with respect to transparency as they relate to the funders?
This is Kari, and I love this question so much. I'm going to steal it from Andrea right now.
Okay.
So this your question, Valerie, about transparency, I think it really drives at the heart of what GrantAdvisor as a project and a web service is really all about. So you're so right that we've been seeing increased demands on nonprofits to be completely transparent. And that transparency often looks like, having to conduct really diligent program evaluation, writing thoughtful reports to funders. And, a part of this influence we've seen, I think, driven by the corporate sector. So, with corporate philanthropy really kind of rising, especially in Minnesota, in terms of total dollars being paid out into our communities, we've seen in turn then a focus on kind of outputs and efficiencies and ways of being able to quantify and verify the success of our work. And so as a result, one benefit of this is that nonprofits now kind of have access to all sorts of additional information about their programs, their service delivery methods that they might not have otherwise had, and that can be used for, strategic decision making and goal setting. But the downside is that nonprofits are already tasked with this huge responsibility running at, very complex social problems. And so, in Minnesota in particular, nonprofit employees make up 11.5% of kind of our total workforce. So that's a great number, and yet, 11.5% of the workforce is expected to solve really complex problems like homelessness and healthy food access and educational inequities. So transparency itself can be a good thing. It's hold it in the context of all the bigger work that we're trying to advance. So that's kind of on the nonprofit side. In terms of what GrantAdvisor is trying to promote for foundations and philanthropy, that transparency can be a really good thing if it builds trust. And we think that the best trust is really built on a two-way street. And so, one of the challenges of the current context is that with nonprofits being asked to do so much, that same level of scrutiny and honesty really isn't required of foundations. There's little to no public accountability for foundations to verify that their own investment strategy has actually yielded the results that they were striving for. And so, at least in the eyes of the IRS, foundations are also tax-exempt entities just like our nonprofits. And so GrantAdvisor is really striving to be that public accountability for both foundations and nonprofits to ensure that we're all investing and running at the work that best meets the needs of our communities.
That is really awesome. Okay, so Andrea, that's a perfect segue into my next question. Can you give us the backstory on GrantAdvisors, what it is, how it was developed, and, when you do that, give us a brief history, the who, the what, the why, when, where. You can tell I'm looking for a story. I just love detail, as you can see. So without further ado, let me get out your way and let you answer the question.
So GrantAdvisor is sort of the brainchild of the three executive leaders who are the project partners. So if you visit grantadvisor.org, you go to our About Us page, you see a whole list of people who are thought leaders in the field and et cetera. Yes. And so there are three project partners. And so that's John Pratt, who's the executive director here at Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, Jim Asuka from California Association of Nonprofits, and Perlini, who's the CEO from Great Nonprofits. And so they're the three project partners, and the staff at those organizations are the ones who are working on the administrative part of the site, getting the word out, things like that. And so as that project formed, they like to say they had the idea at the same time for GrantAdvisor, and so that's how they came to work together. And that's why the project is being targeted in California and Minnesota right now as well. And then as the project formed, they realized that the success would rely on the kind of network effect. And so they established that national leadership panel that you can see on the About Us page at GrantAdvisor. And that panel includes executive level leaders from funders, from funders, nonprofits, and nonprofit support networks. And so we sought out those leaders working at organization who kind of had the mission of GrantAdvisor in their bones already, and kind of the idea of that trust-based grant making that Kari was just talking about.
Okay. So great. I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Kari Aanestad. She's the Development Manager at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and Andrea Sanow. She's the GrantAdvisor Coordinator at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits as well. And we'll be taking questions from our listening audience at about the 30-minute mark. If you want to participate in the chat room, you can do so right now. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. So, Andrea, can you tell us who some of your partners and allies are, and while you're at it, can you make the distinction between a partner and an ally?
Yeah, so we have our project partners are the ones I just mentioned from MCN, Cal Nonprofits, and Great Nonprofits. So those are folks who are providing the administrative support for the site. They're in charge of it. So when you email on our website, team@GrantAdvisor, that comes to all of us, and then we respond to folks if they have questions or feedback. And then our allies and partners, or our allies, are folks who are on our national leadership panel, and that includes foundations who advise us, like the Peary Foundation and Greenlight Fund Bay Area, Open Road Alliance, and the Thompson Family Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, awesome. So, Kari, if I were a nonprofit leader, particularly one who's interfaced with foundations in a grant writing capacity, why should I take the time out of my very busy schedule to write a review of the foundations that I've worked with, who have also funded my organization? In other words, why is this platform important?
I also love this question so much, Valerie, and as a grant writer myself, I just have to say I totally appreciate that you understand my work and my schedule. You're right, we are so busy. So I think there are a number of reasons to your last question, why this platform is both important and useful and, really worth the investment of our precious time as fundraising professionals. So as a grant writer, I love enumerating things, so I'm going to give you 4 reasons why I think it's important.
Okay.
So number 1, I think there's really a unique opportunity for us to influence philanthropy for the better of all. So, part of my role is professional development for fundraisers across Minnesota. And one thing that I like to talk about in the grant writing clinics that I do is kind of name that I think can often fall into an us versus them mentality when we're talking about foundations and nonprofits. But what I think many people don't realize is that, foundations are actually also nonprofits. They are tax exempt. They have missions that articulate their vision for their communities. And so it may sound cheesy, but if you kind of hold on to that and kind of release the grip on the us versus them mentality, I think we can land at this really productive space, this kind of we're all in this together. And the more honest we can be with one another about, what is and what isn't working, I think the greater the chances are that we'll achieve really great things. And so GrantAdvisor is, this online website where people can fill out a 7-minute survey. It walks them through kind of critical questions on what their experience was like, not only kind of in the process side of things, like what was your experience like navigating the application process, but then also prompts people to think more reflectively about how foundations are accomplishing those philanthropic goals or that their overarching missions. And so it really gives power to the voice of grant seekers that may not, otherwise be there. So there's an opportunity for us to influence kind of where philanthropy is making investments. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think this website is important because there's an equity issue at stake. I'm guessing many of your listeners right now know of or actively follow Vule. He's a popular nonprofit blogger. He's got that blog called Nonprofit AF. And we are proud to claim him as a GrantAdvisor National Panel member. So he's one of our advising members of this project. And he's written a lot about what he calls trickle-down community engagement. So in this term, he unpacks by saying that institutional philanthropy is designed in such a way that can create barriers for smaller nonprofits, often led by or serving communities of color, so barriers for them to accessing grant funds. So the idea being that larger nonprofit organizations who can afford to kind of invest in professional fundraisers end up getting a lot of that grant funding. And then they end up contracting with those smaller organizations to do a lot of the work. And so then whatever kind of grant dollars then are allocated out end up only being kind of a percentage of the total funds that could go to supporting that work. So one of the goals of the website is we're hoping to kind of lift the curtain on institutional philanthropy and really increase access to what we think of as some of the kind of insider information to smaller nonprofits who are doing great work but seem to have trouble securing those grants because they maybe don't know how to play the game or have resources to invest in playing that game. So third reason, I think it also has efficiency and effectiveness. By the more information that we as grant writers have available to us, the more kind of effectively we'll build work plans and hopefully be successful in our grant seeking. And then finally, I think it's just cathartic to share our experiences.
Oh, that's funny. The choice of words, cathartic. I won't ask why you use that choice of words. I have a feeling based on my own experience, but I won't share it.
You can share it on GrantAdvisor, Valerie.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm sorry, I interrupt.
No, that's it. That's my fourth one. It's cathartic to share our experiences.
Yes, and that's her story. She's sticking to it, and I agree. I think that the more experiences we share in a safe environment, the better. All too often, we on the other side, we who are working with nonprofits, if we're writing grants and we have the relationships with the foundations, we want to be very, very careful about what we say, how we say it, and all that good stuff. And sometimes we're not candid. And as a result, the grant makers, I think, miss an opportunity, as you alluded to, but we miss an opportunity. And I think over time, as more information is shared, and for lack of a better word, a more democratic way, not trying to be political here, but the more information that can be shared both ways, I think the better. You move toward a more efficient market of information, and I really applaud you guys for doing this, and I was really intrigued when I found out about it.
Thank you.
So I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Kari Aanestad, Development Manager at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and Andrea Sanow, GrantAdvisor Coordinator, also at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. We'll be taking questions from our listening audience and chat room at about the 30-minute mark, so we have about 7 more minutes. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. I also want to take a moment to let folks know how they can strengthen their organization's Giving Tuesday efforts by participating in Webinar Wednesdays. So every Wednesday, starting this Wednesday, October 25th, through December 6th, I will be conducting webinars to help organizations strengthen their fundraising efforts for the end of the year and beyond. So if you're interested in knowing more, contact me at consulting@valerieleonard.com. You can share further information. So, Andrea, can you share with us some of the feedback you're hearing regarding the GrantAdvisor platform, and then tell us who has come out and endorsed the product?
Yeah, I think there are a few ways I could answer that question. And so first might be what we are hearing about the site itself, and then second, what kind of feedback our survey is getting. And I think Kari has some good thoughts on the first way to answer that, so I'll let her get to that in a minute. But I do have a review that's also live on the site for one of our Minnesota foundations, and I think it captures kind of the essence of what we are hoping these reviews will provide grant seekers. So which is both, as Kari was just saying, an understanding of how to approach a funder and sort of that larger, more philosophical response that gets at the funder's philanthropic goals. So the review I have here is for Otto Bremer Trust. And if you've been on the site, that's great, and I've written a review. But if you haven't, this is also a preview of what that survey is like. And so in response to our first question, which prompts the reviewer to give advice to a colleague, this reviewer says, quote, program officers at OBT, which is Otto Bremer Trust, have been remarkable. Most are down to earth, very approachable, and will give a good idea a fighting chance. Their funding priorities are broader than most foundations, and then in parentheses, poverty, which allows organizations large and small to innovate and try new things. Program officers are also diverse, which makes me feel like they relate better with the needs of communities. The only criticism I have is transparency in their staffing and leadership selection. Unfortunately, Otto Bremer Trust tends to find themselves in the news for the wrong reasons. All in all, OBT, Otto Bremer Trust, is one of the best foundations to work with, hands down, end quote. So if you keep reading this review, you can see that this person was funded in 2016. The reviewer was funded in 2016 for a lesser amount than requested, and that they think the foundation's accessibility is, quote, good, and that the program officers will call you back, but trying to schedule meetings at the highest level is a challenge. I'm not sure how connected the 3 trustees are in the community, end quote. So you can sense, I really like this review because you can sense that transactional element in this response, which help those who want to approach the foundation. So, but in the response to the next question on our survey, we get to see that philosophical commentary on the funder's philanthropic focus and goals, which speaks to their mission in the community. And so our question says, so this is our survey question that folks can answer if they go to write a review. If you had one piece of advice to give this funder about grant making or anything else, what would it be? And so the response says, quote, Mr. Otto Bremer, who's the founder of Otto Bremer Trust. So we usually don't allow names in our of staff members in our reviews, but for this one, because he's the founder, we thought it was just speaking to the larger goals, and so we let it live on the site. So Mr. Otto Bremer was an immigrant who found success in banking. My challenge to the foundation is to reconnect with his roots by investing more in refugees and immigrants. Minnesota is a hub to some of the largest immigrant groups, namely Hmong and Somali. With all the negativity in the news surrounding DACA, undocumented workers, Islamophobia, etc., the foundation should take more leadership in this area, end quote.
I love it.
So not all the reviews on the site capture this information or this much information about the surrounding community. And we like those reviews too, but I really like this one, like I said, because I think it captured both that transactional element, like the how exactly do I approach this funder, something that maybe you would have gotten from a colleague, over coffee, but now it's accessible to you on this website. And then the review also sort of shares those broader implications and impact of the foundation's work. And so I wanted to highlight that one as a review that I really think is doing the work that we hope to see on GrantAdvisor. And then you also asked me who has endorsed the product. And I think I would change it to featured and say we've been featured in local and national publications, including the Star Tribune, which is Minnesota's largest newspaper. And then, as Kari mentioned, Voulet, our National Leadership Panel member, wrote about us on his nonprofit AF, which we know to mean and fabulous or and fearless, on his blog in September.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a few foundations solicit reviews from their grantees and emailed to them. So, yeah, and that's been really fun to see.
Yeah, and I heard about this through GuideStar. You know, I'm on their distribution list, and I was like, wow, this is really, really exciting. And I'm going to have some folks on from GuideStar on the show in a couple of weeks. And, you know, I asked them, you know, about this product. And, you know, they were, at least the people that I was talking to, you know, they're more or less in PR. They're not aware of any partnerships per se, but they definitely are in support of, you know, more transparency in, you know, in the nonprofit sector, foundation sector, you know, as an extension. So I thank you guys tremendously, and I think this will really, really help. You know, sometimes, you know, we feel, and when I say we the people who are applying for grants, we feel that grant makers can sometimes be in the ivory towers. That was a Freudian slip. Ivory towers. A lot of a lot of these foundations are run by academics with PhDs, or, you know, they're very much entrenched in theory and don't always, you know, have a chance to have their ear to the ground. And when they do, you know, like I said before, people may feel a little bit intimidated about being candid. So I think this provides the perfect vehicle. And I know you mentioned that Kari may have some feedback on this particular issue. Kari, did you have anything you want to say before I ask Andrea a follow-up question?
Yeah, so I think Andrea was highlighting kind of the feedback we're receiving on the website itself. I think kind of our number one piece of feedback that's been coming both through, you know, our last question on our survey is, do you have any feedback for us on the site? And an overwhelming response of people kind of wanting clarification around the Minnesota-California outreach, and then asking if they can write reviews if they're in other states. And so I'm so glad that was a part of your opening, and we take that feedback to be a huge indicator that the service is kind of wanted and needed. And just to kind of clarify that, that our focus on Minnesota and California is really about our own marketing and outreach, and that the site is open for all, any fundraiser kind of working in the United States and seeking funding from foundations located here as well.
Okay, awesome. And just so you know, when I sent out an email, you know, letting folks know that you guys were going to be on the show today, you know, a colleague of mine, Otis Monroe with the Monroe Foundation, he convenes a cohort of smaller organizations, you know, emerging nonprofits, and he encouraged them to listen to the show. I hope some of them are listening, and if you're listening, please call in or participate in the chat. That would be very, very helpful. And on that note, it is time to call in, but, you know, we're going to continue our conversation until we hear from you. You can call in at 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. So, you know, I think you're right. You guys have definitely struck a chord. I think people would welcome the opportunity to provide feedback. So, you know, we have a two-way feedback loop, and it's not always the foundation to grantee, but, you know, grantee to foundations as well. So with that said, you know, so far we don't have any questions. I do see some people who have called in but have not asked any questions, but, you know, we're definitely encouraging people to ask questions. Now, one thing I did not hear is the link. You know, I didn't hear the URL for GrantAdvisor. So if you guys can share URL, that would be awesome, so that people know where they can go to, you know, to access the site.
Yeah, we're at www.grantadvisor.org.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can follow us on Twitter if they want to.
Oh, yeah. So what are
yeah.
your handles?
Yeah, we're on Twitter at Grant_Advisor. And we have a pretty new Twitter account, but on Fridays we do a 5 to go live. So that's where we post the foundations who need a few more reviews to go live on the site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That week.
All right. Awesome.
By the next Monday. So.
Mhm. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kari, what are some of the lessons you've learned in your work, rolling out the GrantAdvisor platform, and then, once you have learned those lessons and sift through them, and I know it's a young platform, so there may not be, you may not necessarily have all the data that you'd like to have, but just as an impression, and from what you're learning so far, how is that going to inform your work in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started receiving reviews just this past June, and then we went kind of live in July. So we are really, as a project, about 3 months old, just under. So a lot of our work kind of has been focused on really perfecting, I think, or continually evolving the kind of the technical functioning of the website, and then really boost kind of channeling marketing and outreach to nonprofits in Minnesota and California. So with that said, we have had the opportunity kind of in podcast moments like this to kind of pause the running and do a little reflective look back. So, over the past 3 months, I think we've learned a couple of things. First, there really is a demand and hunger for a tool like GrantAdvisor. So within 3 months, we've had nearly 800 people register with the site and have started writing reviews. And we just passed the 800 review mark on the site. So there are close to 50 foundations who have met. We have a 5 review threshold before a foundation profile can go live on the site. And that's really about just making sure that we get a broad sample of kind of feedback and not just one review will flavor kind of the profile of any given foundation. So those are kind of numbers and statistics that are verifying the demand and value of a website like this. I think another lesson that we're learning is, and Valerie, you've named this really eloquently throughout the podcast so far, is the power of that the power differential that exists between nonprofits and foundations, and that fear among nonprofits of potentially losing funding or good rapport that they may have with some very important relationships. And so one of the things that we've kind of had to get in front of or proactively message against is this question about reviewer anonymity. And so to anyone who's listening, we guarantee that you are anonymous. Obviously, the kind of if you write your review in such a way that would make you clearly identifiable to a foundation, that would be maybe the only way that you would be revealed. But we really have built this site based on the idea of kind of knowing the power of that power differential, and that in order to get kind of honest and authentic feedback, we really have to guarantee that reviewer anonymity. And so that is guaranteed. So kind of connected to that lesson then is also, I think, a fear that we've heard from foundations is that because of that anonymity factor, that somehow this website would then dredge up all of the worst parts about the internet, that it would just have, reviews that are full of kind of venomous things. And we're really excited to see that hasn't been realized so far, that really people have been using it as it's intended. So the audience is fundraising, grant writing professionals, and kind of the caliber of the comments that we've received, it makes sense that it's coming from professional writers, right? So they're thoughtful, They're constructive. About a third of the comments that we've seen have been very kind of thoughtful, productive criticism. And then about two-thirds have been somewhere between kind of neutral to positive. So we're excited to see that there's demand for the site, that people are interested in writing on it, and that kind of some of the worst fears haven't come true. And then kind of lessons learned looking forward. We're excited to think about kind of strategic ways of expanding. So looking at other states, looking to expand to potentially reviewing government-based funders. So right now, you can review any foundation that files a 990 form in the IRS. So that's how our database is populated, which is really extensive. It's 120-some thousand foundations, but doesn't actually have government yet. So coming soon.
Yes. And I think in a prior conversation, we had before, if you haven't done so, I would strongly recommend that you reach out to Forefront here in Chicago, listening to the way you young ladies speak in general and knowing what I know about them and listening how they speak in general. You have a lot in common, and this might make a wonderful partnership. And, Illinois, I think the environment is just ripe for this. So if you have not done so, speak to them. If you don't have direct relationships, I'll make sure I put you in contact with them. I think that would be just awesome.
That's a great suggestion. Okay. Andrea and I are both writing it down again.
Okay. And then, I'll follow up after the show. All righty. So we have a question in the chat room, and I think you kind of touched on it before, and I guess it's a follow-up to a comment that was made earlier. In terms of, I guess, being a user of the profiles, what would you recommend, and you can't really tell, what to put in the review, but what would you recommend as making a strong impact, for a review? I know you gave, pretty good examples, but it seems that the writer would want to know, what are some do's and don'ts to writing the reviews?
Yes, that's a great question. This is Kari. So I think there are kind of a few key questions that, I as a grant seeker have found valuable when reading reviews. So it's interesting. This website kind of has two core audiences. One is foundations with this goal of being an honest conversation and kind of reforming or improving philanthropic practices. And then a secondary audience is people like me, so people who have never approached a foundation before or a specific foundation before and want to know what is it like to work with the Otto Bremer Trust, to Andrea's earlier example. And so I think you can think about that question from those two lenses. So as a reviewer, kind of what's the goal that you have with the review? Is it to help kind of your colleagues better understand what it's like to work with that foundation, or are you hoping to give kind of constructive feedback or honest feedback to a foundation in hopes that you can see a positive change in practices? So, with those two lenses in mind, I think either way, kind of specifics are helpful. So if you're in being able to quantify things, so if filling out their manual board list where you have to hand type, and this is a true story, I had to do this for years. I had a funder who required us to hand type each of our board members' names, positions, length of service, contact information, and organizational affiliation. It took 2 to 3 hours every year. That helps both grant seekers like me know to kind of build that time into my work plan if that's a prospect of mine. And then there's also really great feedback that a foundation might not otherwise know if they've never had to go through their own application process.
I like that. So I guess if foundations could write the applications as if they would have to go through it themselves, we might see different types of applications and different types.
Right.
That's just me. That's just me and my wishful thinking. And I'm not trying to say that all foundations have these onerous processes, but sometimes we don't realize what we're asking until someone tells us that the questions that we're asking are really creating an undue burden in terms of time and resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even our federal government is coming to realize that. Federal government, I know here in the state of Illinois, they spent like 2 years trying to streamline the process so that we have a central vault that's similar to what you would see at the federal government level. The grants.gov, we have a grants.illinois.gov. But I will say their process, their registration requires much more than the federal, but other than that, it's a streamlined process. But I'm not here to editorialize, am I? I'm sorry, I digress. So, so Kari, along the same lines, we talked about the lessons learned. Can you share a little bit more about the impact you're seeing in philanthropy? And it is a short period, so you may not necessarily have all of those data, but are you seeing some responses? I know you mentioned that one foundation solicited feedback themselves, which I think is a great impact already.
Yeah, well, I think, it's really exciting. I think this project is coming. I'll kind of speak about kind of the context that GrantAdvisor as a platform is coming into being, because I think it's coming on the scene at a perfect time. Kind of nationally, there's this momentum that we're seeing around the transparency that you named earlier, Valerie, and a quest for feedback in philanthropy. So, nationwide, we've seen over the past few years kind of more progressive, kind of early adopter foundations who have really began to focus their approaches on, and Andrea used this term earlier, kind of trust-based philanthropy. So the Whitman Institute in California, who is one of the early funders of this project, and Robert Sterling Clark Foundation in New York are two of those great examples that if you kind of look at their website, they have language around what it is to be involved in trust-based philanthropy. So kind of what that means is that there's kind of lower burdens of reporting for nonprofits, that they don't see themselves as the accountability person, but really a true partner with nonprofits in the great work, that they're not the ones that have to motivate the great work, that nonprofits are already going to kind of take that on themselves. And so there's momentum around that. And then there's also a number of other projects and organizations that are also leading great work around transparency and feedback. So the Center for Effective Philanthropy in Glass Pockets, that's an Initiative Foundation center. We are lucky to have Janet Camarana on our national leadership panel, who's a part of the Glass Pockets Initiative. So all of this is to say that I think there's this national momentum around transparency and feedback, and that GrantAdvisor gets to kind of come into its own in the midst of really great leaders and great initiatives around that, and then also be unique in it. So it is the only of its kind in that it's crowdsourcing the information. It's really relying on fundraising professionals and grant writers, to kind of increase that public awareness and make publicly available the experiences and feedback from grant seekers. So it's this unique tool that's a part of this national movement. And so then in Minnesota specifically, as Andrea had mentioned before, we were seeing great enthusiasm from a number of those early adopter foundations. So we've had a number of them kind of share updates with their board, use the feedback and reviews as a part of their kind of strategic planning process or board-level conversations. Andrea has been doing brilliant work to develop a toolkit. So if a foundation is interested in kind of marketing this and using this feedback, I know foundations can invest a lot in surveys and in kind of evaluation of their strategies, that this is a free resource to them. And so to definitely reach out to Andrea if they're interested in kind of getting some of things that are in that toolbox, so sample emails and that sort of thing.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I will definitely be following up with Andrea after this call and, sharing the information in my network. Yeah, I think this is really important stuff.
Great.
Okay, so I want to remind our listening audience once more that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Kari Aanestad, Development Director at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and Andrea Sanow, GrantAdvisor Coordinator, also at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. We're taking questions now. Please give us a call, 347-884-8121. And if you would like to post in our chat room, please join the conversation there. We have a few more minutes, and we want to make sure that your voices are heard. So, Andrea, can you walk our listening audience through this process and let them know, how exactly they should go about filling out, one of the profiles for a foundation?
So I talked a little bit already about the survey responses. So that's if you're writing a review, you can register as a reviewer on the site, fill out the survey there. But if you're a foundation and you want to set up you want to register as a key contact, you can just go to grantadvisor.org. And in the right-hand corner of our site, we have a register tab, and that's right on the homepage. And then when you register as a key contact, you can also include an email address for a secondary contact. And so when someone does write a review, if you're the key contact and the secondary contact, you'll get a notification via email, and you can read the review before it's live on the site. And then you can also respond to the review before it's posted live. And again, you have to have 5 reviews total that abide by our community guidelines before your profile is live on the site. And then our reviews are all monitored to make sure they are abiding by those community guidelines. They have a filter for spam, and then a human filter, which is me and my counterpart in California. And we make sure that no names are mentioned of staff. There's not any profanity if the spam filter would have missed it, which it has not yet.
Great.
And then those reviews take 48 hours to go live on the site. And in that time, again, foundations and the key contacts at funders have a chance to respond to the reviews. So and that's what they can expect. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
So if you're a foundation and you have not yet accumulated 5 reviews, do you still get that feedback offline? Yeah,
so you'll still get the review. It just won't be posted publicly. And that, as Kari said before, is just to make sure that there's not like one review out there that's particularly negative, if that's not capturing the whole, scope of the work and the grantees' experiences. Yeah. But you can still read that review and respond to it, and then once you get 4 more, then it goes live on the site.
Okay. Yes, I love it. So this is really good stuff. I can really see you guys on the forefront of a movement, so ride that wave. I can see lots of potential here.
Good.
So, Kari, you're in a position in which you're raising funds and you're developing other resources for the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. The Minnesota Council of Nonprofits is a member organization that provides professional development, networking, capacity building, et cetera, with a particular emphasis on policy and advocacy on behalf of your members. So I can imagine in your position, as well as anybody who is in a position where they're dealing with policy and advocacy, sometimes it gets to be a little funders who will fund your work. Did you find yourself in any ticklish positions? Was it difficult to get support for this project from foundations, or have you been, very lucky to get folks to jump in head first?
This is such a great question, Valerie. So all of the kind of grant funding for this project so far has come from Silicon Valley in California. So primarily supported from foundations like the Peary Foundation and the Whitman Institute. So those kind of early adopter, progressive change maker foundations who kind of share our interest in and kind of see the, like you said, the early part of a wave, the transformative potential of this tool. So the rest of the support for the project has come from what our executive director, John Pratt, calls sweat equity. So the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and then our two partners, Great Nonprofits in California, Association of Nonprofits out in California. We all are kind of doing our part and really believe in the mission and the goals of this project. So investing our time and agency resources into making it possible. With all of that being said, I wouldn't be a good fundraiser if I didn't say there are leadership opportunities. So if anyone listening is interested in supporting the project, they can reach out to me.
Yeah, and following up, so if you're in one of those states where you don't necessarily have quite as strong a presence as, say, Minnesota and California, because, resources right now can only go so far, how do you, as a nonprofit, get a movement going in your particular state so that we can start seeing presence on the GrantAdvisor platform from other states?
That is a great question. Yeah, so one of our kind of ideas around how this project can and would spread is similar to what happened with Facebook. So really it's this network effect that if any of you remember how Facebook rolled out, I do because I happened to be in college way back in the day when this happened, that it started geographically, but not just geographically. You had to have an email address that ended with edu, so you had to be affiliated. And then it was within even, I think, specific colleges. So I think it was only Ivy League universities first, and then it went to kind of all colleges. And then, so in doing so, it kind of targeted who they were targeting as an audience, and then it built kind of momentum and a desire to be part of the insider group, and we're not trying to erect barriers in that sense, but in kind of focusing on states in our own marketing, we're building that network effect. So with all that to be said, if there are nonprofits that want to get in to be kind of build the momentum in their own state, they can certainly start by reaching out to us. We are, as we turn the corner into 2018, we'll be having kind of strategic meetings as a team and thinking about kind of where to look next and who the big players are and kind of what networks exist within our connections and beyond. So that could be a place to start. If they're kind of more grassroots in their approach, I know Andrea has been working to develop an ambassador toolkit, so similar to one we talked about, the foundation toolkit. This one is really geared toward other nonprofits who may want to help get the word out. And so we have a number of different resources, template language, emails, some flyers, business cards, that sort of thing that we'd be more than willing to share and help get that word out.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Two ways I'm thinking I can personally help you is if there is an RSS feed for this toolkit and, related information, I can post that on my website. So as things get updated, they to a page on my website. And then also I'm going to sign up for alerts. And, and as I get alerts, I can share them in my network. As there are people who could be potential ambassadors, I'll make sure to put you guys in contact with them. So that's my commitment to the project. I really, really think this is exciting stuff. And again, I'm going to put you guys in contact with, Forefront. There may be other, I realize that, you have large organizations and different people have different relationships, but still, I'm going to put you in contact with the folks that I know from Forefront, and who knows what can happen. If they catch on to it, it'll happen really big and really fast in Illinois for you.
Great. Well, we so appreciate that, and look forward to it.
Mhm. Okay, so last question, Andrea. What do you see as some of the next steps for GrantAdvisor?
Yeah, I feel like there are kind of 3 steps. Or in the short term, I think the next step is, like we're talking about now, keep expanding sort of in that organic kind of way, which means encouraging reviews from our nonprofit colleagues, and then supporting the folks who want to be ambassadors of the project, and supporting our foundation colleagues in their work by offering toolkits and language and things around that, so that they can invite reviews and get that constructive feedback. And then in our middle term, I think we're starting to think about where we want to target some of our marketing out on the East Coast. And in the long term, we're looking toward, as Kari said, way earlier in this conversation, including government funders on the site. So a lot of moving pieces, and I think we're trying to be strategic for 2018, but we're always happy to hear from folks who want to be champions and ambassadors of the project. And I love to hear the ideas. Part of our survey, our last question, as Kari had mentioned earlier, is that you can offer feedback to us, and that just comes straight to us, the GrantAdvisor team. And so once you fill out that whole survey, the last question is feedback on the site, and we're always excited to read those ideas and thoughts. So,
okay, awesome. Now, I heard you say East Coast, and my poor little ears peaked up like a German shepherd. Is one of your prospects 92Y? They started the Giving Tuesday movement, which is now international. So have you thought about approaching them at all? And if not, I can put you in touch with someone who might be helpful to you.
This is Kari. We will take your contact if you're willing to make the bridge. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so we got a lot of talking to do after. We'll have a conversation after the conversation. Okay, so this pretty much wraps up our show, and I want to thank everyone. I know that there are people who called in and didn't necessarily want to ask a question, but I appreciate your calls anyway. I appreciate those of you who joined in the chat room, even though you didn't all have comments. I want to let you know that I appreciate you. I hope that this conversation has been very helpful to me. Every time I talk to these young ladies, I learn a lot, and I hope that you have learned a lot too. So I'd like to thank them again. We had Kari Aanestad. She is the Development Manager at Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and Andrea Sanow. She's the GrantAdvisor Coordinator, also at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. So before I let you go, ladies, can you share any parting thoughts and let us know how we can reach you and remind us how we can get involved in this work?
Yeah, this is Kari. The best way to reach us is if you email team@grantadvisor.org. Both Andrea and I receive all of those emails. We are kind of monitoring day and night as this project begins to grow wings and fly. Just want to thank all of the people who have already participated in the conversation, both kind of on the website in the comments and then with us kind of offline. You're really helping this be a tool that helps us best serve our communities. And so just grateful for the current support and encourage everyone who hasn't done so yet but is interested in doing so to check it out and reach out to us with any questions.
Okay, great. So once again,
Valerie, this is Andrea.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to thank you for having us on as well.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank you for having us on, yeah.
And forgive me for jumping the gun. Forgive me. And like I said, it's been wonderful having you both on. Again, I've learned a lot in this conversation, and we've had, prior contact before. I've learned every time, so it's going to be wonderful. All righty. So I want to thank our listening audience once more for listening to Nonprofit Blog Radio Talk Show today. This show will be available for download within about an hour Be sure and join us next week when our guest will be Jody Adler. Jody is the director of the Community Law Project here in Chicago, and Jody will share an overview of the implications of immigration policies on nonprofits and communities and strategies they can share, so what to do when ICE comes knocking on the organization's door. Until then, you have a great day and talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com. Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com.